Hi, I'm Nakul. Today let's read a powerful and evocative soliloquy from Shakespeare's famous tragic play, Macbeth. Unlike Macbeth, I hope you're not contemplating murder anytime soon, but this passage should cover a lot of relatable themes anyway, like inner conflict, ambition, guilt, fate and free will, and time. Shakespeare's unparalleled ability to capture the human psyche draws the audience in. The remarkable illustration of Macbeth's inner world naturally propels us into empathy for Macbeth. We're amazingly able to naturally relate to this character who is in such a completely unrelatable position for most of us. Macbeth is a successful Scottish general who hears a prophecy from three witches that he will ultimately be king. He undergoes a lot of inner conflict upon hearing this, which we'll see in the passage we read today, and ultimately murders King Duncan to assume the throne. However, his guilt and paranoia propel him to commit further acts of violence afterwards.
If it were done when 'tis done, then 'twere well it were done quickly. If the assassination could trammel up the consequence, and catch with his surcease success, that but this blow might be the be-all and the end-all here. So, if it were done when 'tis done, 'twere well it were done quickly. We're already starting off with a confusing statement, probably because Macbeth's thoughts are themselves in a confusing state at this moment. It's hard to discern the tense here. If it were done when 'tis done, 'twere well it were done quickly. So he's basically saying that if he's going to kill Duncan, he should do it quickly and get it over with. He's talking about assassinating the king, which is not something he's done yet, but he's almost talking about it as if it's already happened, right? I mean, done is the most common word here 3 times in this sentence alone. He's talking about it as if it's already done. And relatedly, this is also in passive voice. So Macbeth's talking about killing the king as if it's something that's just going to happen to him, right? The way he's talking about it, it's as if it's going to happen to Macbeth that Macbeth will kill the king, rather than just that Macbeth will kill the king. So the way he's talking about it, it's almost as if it's out of Macbeth's hands. And yet this belief is precisely what is causing Macbeth to take matters into his own hands, right? If it's going to happen anyway, might as well do it quickly. So that brings in the whole fate and free will theme that comes here, right? Because if it's going to happen anyway, might as well do it quickly and get it over with so we can stop worrying about it. So, of course, Macbeth could just do nothing and see what happens. But, Macbeth's not going to murder the king unless Macbeth murders the king. So it really is in his own hands anyway. And yet there's something uncomfortable about the uncertainty. Macbeth today doesn't know what Macbeth tomorrow is going to do. And I think Macbeth's discomfort with his own murderous thoughts are part of what's motivating him to act and act now, which we'll see more of here in this passage. He seems to think that murdering the king will relieve him of his guilt about murdering the king, ironic as that sounds, because then it'll be over with and we won't have to think about it anymore, right? He's saying here, if the assassination could trammel up the consequence, right? As if the assassination itself would trammel up the consequence. So Macbeth right now oddly feels like he will feel less comfortable and less guilty after committing the murder. And again, another note about this, the assassination, this is in passive voice again, right? And the assassination is the subject, not Macbeth is going to do the assassination. The assassination is going to happen as if it's going to happen through Macbeth in a way. And then this statement over here, be all and end all. So this should not be overlooked. We hear be all, end all the time, but this is, I believe, actually where it originated from, the be all and the end all. So once again, we have this indication that Macbeth wants to commit the murder to get it over with, because the murder is the end all anyway. So might as well get there and reach the end rather than live in horrific anticipation. And this assumption of the murder being the end point, being the end all, is what brings us here to the next part of this passage. But here upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. But here upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. So I love this, but I'm actually not entirely sure what it means. So I'm just going to say what comes to my head when I hear this part. But here upon this bank and shoal of time, we jump the life to come. So to me, it feels like he's standing on the edge of a bank and he wants to jump to the other side. So the moment right now he's sitting at the edge of the bank, he's paralyzed, and he wants to jump to the other side after he's murdered Duncan, because again, murdering Duncan is the end all, and after he's gotten this all over with, right? And between now and the end is time. So time is this bank and shoal separating us from now and the end. So time's what's standing between the paralyzed state that Macbeth is in now and the relief from his paralysis that he thinks he's going to get after having murdered Duncan. So, but in these cases, we still have judgment here. That we but teach bloody instructions which, being taught, return to plague the inventor. This even-handed justice commends the ingredients of our poisoned chalice to our own lips. He's here in double trust. First, as I am his kinsman and his subject, strong both against the deed, then as his host, who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife myself. So this is some of the clearest and plainest English, I think, that you can see in a Shakespearean soliloquy, right? You've got ordinal numbers here, like first, then, which is a different kind of rhetoric than is usually employed in Shakespearean soliloquies, which are usually very, very dramatic and poetic, which we'll see a little bit later here, and appeal more to the pathos and the emotions rather than the logos and the logic, which you're getting here from like first and then. An additional note about soliloquies, I think it can be argued that Shakespearean soliloquies are almost inherently egoistic, right? There's a single person dramatically emoting to themselves and to the audience about themselves and their aspirations or their ambitions or their fears or whatever. So, but here, Macbeth is really focused on the other. He's focused on Duncan, and not from a place of desire, the way that Romeo might if he were soliloquizing about Juliet, which would be very dramatic and still have an element of ego-centeredness in it, or from a place of vengeance, like if Hamlet were soliloquizing about Claudius, but rather from the place of an almost omniscient and unbiased narrator describing the situation. And yet there's also an element of compassion here. So there's lots of he and his, right? He's here in double trust. So Duncan trusts Macbeth doubly, both as a kinsman and subject, but also as his host, as Macbeth being his host, a host who should against his murderer shut the door, not bear the knife himself. So there's a lot of other directed language here, right? It's all about Duncan and Macbeth putting himself in Duncan's shoes and having compassion for where Duncan is right now. He's here in double trust, referring to the King Duncan, not Macbeth. He's here in double trust. And I am his kinsman, and I am his subject and his host. So Macbeth's really actually putting himself in Duncan's shoes and seeing Duncan's situation here. This is also the only part of the soliloquy where Macbeth is really actually present rather than projecting himself into a future moment of after having committed the murder, right? He's actually thinking about the present circumstances. So when we started over here with we jump the life to come, and then but in these cases, we still have judgment here. There's almost a pause here. There's almost a breath here. It's almost like he's saying, wait a minute, pause. And we're getting this calmer, plainer passage here, and yet still a compassionate one. So let's move on to the next part. Besides this, Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek, hath been so clear in his great office, that his virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued, against the deep damnation of his taking off, and pity, like a naked newborn babe, striding the blast or heaven's cherubim horsed upon the sightless couriers of the air, shall blow the horrid deed in every eye. Wow, well, this is very beautiful. Very different stylistically from the part of the passage we just read. This part is definitely more poetic, more emotion heavy. We've got some alliteration here that I just can't ignore. Especially as we're reading this aloud right now. So trumpet-tongued against the deep damnation of his taking off. And then here we get a back-to-back, and pity like a naked newborn babe. So this is definitely a more musical, more poetic section, and it's definitely more emotional. So you've got the word so twice here, so meek, so clear in his great office, and that adds emotion, but it also adds some music and poetry. So meek, so clear in his great office. So what is it actually saying, right? It's saying that Duncan is very good-natured, and his virtues will plead like angels. Angels representing all that is good and innocent, right? His virtues will plead like angels, trumpet-tongued. I love trumpet-tongued because angels actually do hold trumpets to their tongues to make announcements. But unlike announcing, let's say, Christ's birth with joy, here they're pleading against this deep damnation. So if the angels, the image of all that is good and pure, are pleading against this trumpet-tongued, then it really is horrible. And pity like a naked newborn babe. I almost wonder here if pity should be capitalized, right? Because it reminds me of the Odyssey, Dawn with her rose-red fingers. So this Hellenic concept of personifying a natural or emotional phenomenon. And again here, pity like a naked newborn babe. So once again, that imagery of something very, very innocent. The opposite of what Macbeth would be if he committed this murder, right, would blow the horrid deed in every eye. So where before he was looking at things from a more outside perspective, here Macbeth is looking at things from a more egocentric perspective again. And I don't mean that in a bad way. In fact, I think we empathize with Macbeth more here because these feelings make him so human, rather than if he merely just said this part of, these are the reasons why I shouldn't do it. Here we're really seeing the humanity come out in the emotions that he's experiencing here. So, but it is an observation worth mentioning that this part it's more emotional, but it's also more egocentric, right? This is about Macbeth and the horrid deed that Macbeth is going to do, and how angels and pity like a naked newborn babe are going to blast this in everyone's ears and eyes, rather than about sort of facing the situation head on and thinking about Duncan's position as he was doing up here. So here it's about how horrible this deed is, and really kind of how horrible Macbeth is for having these ideas. But even the beginning over here, right, about how where it sounds like he's putting himself in Duncan's position. Besides this, Duncan hath borne his faculties so meek. Even this part, it's actually really just a juxtaposition with who Macbeth is in this moment versus Duncan, right? And there's a lot to think about there because Duncan's the king now, and then Macbeth, if he commits this murder, will be the king, right? And he's really thinking about himself versus Duncan here. Duncan being very meek, and Macbeth, if he commits this murder, the opposite of that. So it's that juxtaposition there. This whole section is really all about these songs of innocence and purity and meekness. And in all of that, Macbeth's revealing to us who he thinks he is right now. And he thinks of himself as the opposite of that. He is feeling ashamed of having these thoughts. So let's move to the end of this passage. So that tears shall drown the wind. Oh, I forgot that part of this part before. So that tears shall drown the wind. Whenever I'm sad, I'm going to think about my tears drowning the wind. But now let's read. Let's read the ending part over here. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, which o'erleaps itself and falls on the other. So he's almost describing ambition as the actor here rather than himself, right? The subject here is ambition. Similar to before, the subject's always something else besides Macbeth, right? So the subject here is ambition, vaulting meaning propelling Macbeth into action and ultimately into tragedy. And it looks like this is where he's perhaps most succumbed to the idea that this is his tragic fate. Interestingly, the resolution towards committing the murder is coming right after we had all this song about how terrible it would be for Macbeth to do this. Because rather than engage with his own murderous thoughts and that whole part of him, this section is really Macbeth trying to escape that part of him and the situation overall. And this, I think, sort of reinforces my understanding that Macbeth's discomfort with his own murderous thoughts is what's prompting him to commit the murder. He feels helpless against this part of him. I think the part where he was furthest from committing the murder was the part over here, where he wasn't even talking about that part of him at all, right? Here, he was seeing the situation overall. Rather than kind of getting lost in shame and self-blame. So here with all this song about what a shameful and terrible person he is, he's escaping the reality of the situation rather than seeing it eye to eye the way that he was up here. And this is, to me, what causes him to commit the murder because he feels helpless against those parts of himself. So let me know what you think about this passage. I strongly recommend Macbeth. It's such a fun play. This was a really dense passage, which makes it great for a close reading. But there's actually way more fun passages, like the witches' speeches. So magical creatures in Shakespeare, like fairies and witches, often speak in perfect rhyme. So those sections are super fun. Lady Macbeth's soliloquies are even more intense and fun. And the tomorrow speech that Macbeth delivers towards the end is, of course, so good. So above all, getting to read this play from start to finish and follow Macbeth through his whole journey is such a great experience. So let me know what you thought of this section and of Macbeth overall.